is not what happened to you. It's not the abuse. It's not the war. It's not the pain. It was the wound that you sustained as a result of the abuse, of the war, of those things. So if it was the wound that you sustained as a result of the sexual abuse, of the physical abuse, of you were, at war, since it was the wound, here's the good news in that it was a wound. Because if trauma is a wound, and it is, that happened to us, then it can be healed. How great is that? Think about that. If trauma is the wound that happened to us, it can be healed. And here's the other side of it. If trauma is only what happened to us, then it happened and there's nothing we can do about it. So sometimes we start talking about trauma and we start talking about these things and we start talking about trauma as the event, and that's okay. We start talking to trauma as the abuse and as that awful thing that happened to you. And that is true. That did happen to you. But the trauma is actually the wound. And the great thing about it is you can heal that wound. Like think about it. Trauma is a wound that leaves a scar or an imprint. And for some people, that scar or that wound is open. And as you're living your life, you have this open wound and things are happening. And maybe somebody comes along and touches that open wound. Oh, I don't know if you've ever had that where you've got a wound and it's just and then someone touches it or you pour something on it or it hits something and it just sends you into the next universe because that open wound, man, someone hit it and it's just like, man, that's the same. That's trauma. That's the wound. That's it. That's the scar. And sometimes we're walking around and we're wide open and that thing touches the open wound and you freak out, you get upset, you get mad, all the things happen, the emotions come up. And there's some people who walk around and their wound, if you will, that they sustained because of trauma is not open, but it's covered, it's hard. And they walk around and they're hardened to life and they're hardened to all the things and they have no emotion and it's just like, And so that's the different type of wounds that you have because of what happened to you. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. I know that is bringing you great value. If you could please subscribe to my channel, man, that would be awesome because I would love for this video to help more and more people and serve them in whatever way that they need it. And also, if you could hit the bell deal so that you can get notifications whenever I go live. I try to go live once a week or when a new video is posted. And so what's great about both of those different scenarios and situations of trauma is that since it is a wound that happened to you and some of it is open and some of it is hardened and covered up, that it can be healed. That is beautiful. And I don't know who needed to hear that today, but I want you to know that the thing that happened to you is not the trauma, because if it's a thing that just happened to you, then that cannot be healed and it's just something that happened. But the thing that happened to you created a wound, which is the traumatic event. It is a psychological wound that happened. And if that's the case, then that wound can be healed. And how do I know that? I know that because I'm living proof of that. I had years of traumatic events that happened to me when I was a child. And that didn't come up until I was 38 years old. And I'm just telling you, everything was great. And my life is even better now. But because I was able to heal the wounds and worked really hard and decided, man, I'm going to go all in on trying to heal myself and do what I can. Now I have much more capacity for things that I am just blown away by. And you do too, even though you may not be able to see it, or maybe your friends and family or someone that you love has experienced something and that wound is either open or it is covered up and it is hardened and it is just that wound. Here's what's really neat is it can be healed. And how can it be healed? Well, it can be healed by talk therapy. It can be healed by getting a Christian life coach. It can be healed by medicine. It can be healed by going outside and going on a walk. It can be healed by getting away from the things that are constantly causing the triggers to happen in your life. It can be healed. But one way you've got to deal with it is by looking at it a little bit, like going back a little bit. A massive technique that I use with a lot of my clients is writing it down. Writing down the events that happened to you. When you write them down, and even though it's so hard to do, and I remember when I first started writing down some of the things that happened to me, it was so hard. But man, it was so freeing because it took the top off of all the stuff that I was constantly thinking, and it was just in here. I was able to put it down on on pen and paper and I was able to write it down. And man, it was great. And so I want to encourage you, that is a way to start your healing process. When I meet with my clients and we talk about things, and if they're ready to start talking about the past, then I have them write down the story. And again, there may be people in your life right now and you're like, Michael, I'm not ready to deal with this. I'm not ready. There's people that have hurt me that are still alive, and I'm really not sure how it's going to affect them. I don't know what's going to happen. They've got a family. I don't want to ruin their life. I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want to get fired. I don't want to. And so we start bargaining, right? We start bargaining with all these different emotions and feelings that we're having when it comes to dealing with some of these traumatic events, because some of the people may still be in your life. Here's something that I heard, and I absolutely love it. Here's what you need to know. If you're afraid and you're worried and you're nervous of how you talking about the events that happened to you in the past and how much they hurt you, and that person is still around, and you're afraid how that person is going to react, here's what you need to let them know. If they don't want to be a part of your story, then they shouldn't have played that part in your story. And so just remember that. If they're worried about you telling the story, then they shouldn't have played that part in your story, because that is your story. And you know what? It's okay to tell your story, because when you start to tell it, when you start to write it down, when you start to let it out, you start to heal. You were like, man, I want to work with you, and I would love the opportunity to get to know you and set up an initial call to see if we can work together and what package would be perfect for you. Let me know, because I believe that coaching could truly change your life.